Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. All right. I am super excited for today's episode. I have an amazing friend here with me. Karin is a stay-at-home mom of 4 kids under 8, and she's truly one of the most amazing people that I've ever met. Karin has given birth vaginally to all 4 of her children, and one of which she didn't even know that she was pregnant with until she was in labor. So from pregnancy, birth, postpartum, all the things, we're going to talk about it all today. So thank you, Karin, for joining me today. I'm super excited, and I'm sure just based off that intro, people are going to be zoned right in.
Thank you so much for having me. It's pretty interesting, my whole birth journey, my journey to pregnancy and having 4 kids.
Yeah, so when I was trying to figure out the whole podcast thing, I think I told you, but one of my clients was like, oh my gosh, I would love to hear birth stories and postpartum stories so that I can feel like it's not just me. And I was like, oh my gosh, great idea. I don't really know who I'd have, but whatever. And then you posted a birthday post for one of your kiddos. And I was like, okay, hang on. I've always been told snippets of this unknown pregnancy story, but I've never been told the whole thing. And I was like, I mean, if you want to just come on the podcast, you can. And you're like, yes. And I was like,
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's my favorite story to tell because it's a pretty unique story. So
right. And I feel like most people, when I'm sure you say that, people are like, what do you mean you didn't know you were pregnant? How is that even possible? Which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for you to be the first of this little mini series that I'm going to be doing where people are going to be able to come on and, share their birth experiences and postpartum experiences. And, we've said, you've done it 4 times. So I'm sure you have things that you learned and liked and didn't like as things went on. So I'm super excited about that. But yeah, so if we want to start, I know that you obviously have 4 different birth stories that you can kind of tell us a bit about, with the last one being the big, icing on the cake. But if you want to give us a rundown of kind of what life looked like for you and all the births and all the things, whatever you want to share, I'm happy to hear, and in as much depth or as less depth as you want, but go for it. I'm sure the listeners are going to be hyped too. So.
All right. So, my first pregnancy, I got pregnant in January. Well, actually, my first pregnancy, I had a miscarriage, which is actually super normal. Doctors told me a lot of people actually have miscarriages for their first pregnancy because your body doesn't quite know what to do. And so that was okay. And then I actually got pregnant the next month. So January 2015, I got pregnant, and everything was great for a long time. And I ended up having preeclampsia, was induced at 36 weeks, and had my first daughter. I was induced, and it was a 5-hour labor, which for an induction and a first baby, the nurses and doctors were like, that's basically unheard of. You are meant to have babies. So that was my first one. My second one, he was born at 38 weeks, and he was born the week of the solar eclipse in 2017. And he was born in 2 hours. So labor was 2 hours long. So they were basically like, as soon as you feel twinges, just come on in.
Right, because they say they come faster. As you have more, they come faster. And if you've already had such a fast first labor, they were probably like, oh my gosh, get your butt in here.
So his actual birth story is probably the funniest because it was the solar eclipse, there were 1 billion people in labor and delivery, and they had trouble finding me a room. So when I finally got into the room, they were like, why don't you walk down to the delivery room because it'll help speed up labor? And I was like, that's totally cool. So I walked down there, and I got in there, and I'd been begging for an epidural. So I said, can I go to the bathroom before I get in bed and get the epidural, before I'm not allowed to get up, right? So she's like, yeah. The nurse says to me, I'll never forget this. She looks me right in the eye, and she says, you can go to the bathroom, but if you feel like you have to poop, you call me and get in bed. And I was like, okay, that's super weird. And then I went into the bathroom and felt like I had to poop and started peeing all over the floor. I didn't even make it to the toilet. And I am screaming at myself not to bear down. I'm in the bathroom yelling my full name to myself, not to bear down. They get me in the bed, they check me. I'd gone from 6 centimeters in triage, which was literally like just down the hall, to 10.
Oh my gosh.
And so she's like, okay, so I'm gonna get your stuff in the system really quick and I'm gonna call the doctor and like you're gonna have this baby right now.
You're
The
like, where the
doctor,
heck is my epidural?
I know, right? So the doctor comes like running in. She actually left a lady in the stirrups in the ER because the nurse was that like panicked, like, you have to come now. And she literally walked in, like basically threw gloves on, and he was born. He was born in 2 pushes. And he came out and call, which was really cool, but we didn't get any pictures of it because the it actually burst like as she caught him. So he
Okay.
came out completely in the sack, but then it broke like as she caught him.
That's so cool. I've seen pictures
Yeah.
of that and I'm always like, that's like so grossly amazing. Like
I wish I like, looking back, like I wish we could have gotten a picture, but she was like, it literally, she was like, I would have gotten a picture, but it broke like as he was being
yeah.
born. So but the funny part about that was that then while I was being stitched up afterwards, the anesthesiologist came in and was like, "Who's ready for an epidural?" And my
Oh my
husband was
gosh.
like, "Mm-mm,
You're like,
run,
nope, nope,
man,
we're not talking about this right now.
run, man."
Oh my
He walked in.
gosh.
I've never seen a doctor turn so quickly and run out of a room. It was so funny. He was like, "Oh, I made a big boo boo."
Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh. But
that was
good
number
enough.
two.
It was a fast one though. So hopefully
It
the labor pains
It
like
was,
were
and like
there
it
and
was a
gone.
struggle because the labor pains were god awful.
Mm,
And like I'd had the Pitocin ones before, but because I was able to get an epidural because it was a little bit slower, it wasn't as bad. But the pains, like doing that naturally, was really hard. I remember screaming, "Oh, this is what the Ring of Fire feels like."
oh my gosh. Yeah. That's
Um,
insane.
but it was fast. And so that was like I literally said to my husband as we were walking down the hall, like, I either need an epidural or I need to just have this baby. So at that
Right.
point, like, I didn't really care. I just wanted relief,
You just manifested it to
I
happen.
really did. I really did.
Now that was your first and then your second birth.
Right.
Was there anything going into your second birth that you were like, or even thinking about birth or postpartum or anything that you were like, I really didn't get this the first time. I really want this the second time, or anything that you were like really wanting done or not done for birth or postpartum the second time around?
I mean, so with my first birth, like I had just like a lot of preconceived notions about it. And everybody kept telling me like you're gonna be in labor for days. Like my mom was in labor with me for like 26 hours, I think,
Oh my
or
gosh.
36 hours, something like
Mhm.
that. So I was literally going into it like I'm gonna be in labor for 6 days. Like I'm gonna be in labor for a week and this baby's never gonna come and I'm gonna end up having a C-section, like all this crazy stuff. But I had all of these things that I really wanted. And going into my second, I was just kind of like, I kind of just like let it all go. It was sort of like, okay, well, I can't control it. Like my first birth was so far out of my control with like the induction and the preeclampsia. And she had to go to the NICU because she was early and they weren't sure about her lungs. And she ended up being fine. She came home with me. Everything was fine. But like she couldn't be in the room with me because I was still on the magnesium for 24 hours afterwards. So like I wasn't allowed to hold her because I was super loopy unless other
Mm.
people were present. So like I sort of just threw everything out the window with my second birth and was like, whatever happens, happens. And thank God I did because I
Right,
mean,
because it was so fast. And that's like
it was fast and
honestly,
furious.
I feel like no matter how much people plan for like birth, I mean, there's so many people do birth plans. It's especially nowadays, like everybody has a birth plan,
Oh
which is like
yeah.
the reason why this podcast is a thing, because like postpartum plan should be a thing too. But
Hmm.
it's for sure, like as somebody, I've never had children, but I'm so type A with scheduling and stuff. I'm like, I have to somehow adapt that mindset when I end up having children because literally everything can go sideways and like
Yes.
for the good or for the bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't you not getting the epidural and ended up having a baby in so quickly. It wasn't a bad thing. Like he's
Right.
okay, but
Yeah.
like it wasn't what you were planning to do 5 minutes prior.
Right. I mean, my first baby was born on 9/11, and when I was induced at 3 in the morning on 9/11, I cried. I literally cried because I was like, my baby's going to be born on the worst day in our history. Like I was beside myself. Now, obviously, like hormones and everything played into that because
Right.
now looking back, I'm like, thank God, because now I have something nice to think about on 9/11, something happy,
Right.
something good. Um, so yeah, so like I literally everything I'd ever thought. And I am a super scheduled person too. So like I was like, trying to let that go. And especially with my third. So going into my third, she was totally natural. The only like intervention that I had was that at 39 weeks, I had a membrane sweep. The
Okay.
only reason I had a membrane sweep was because it was a Monday and my birthday was Wednesday. And I told my doctor I didn't want to have her on my birthday. I was like, I don't care if I'm in the hospital. I don't care about anything else, but like, I don't want to share a birthday with her. And thank God my gynecologist has 4 kids. She also has 4, but 3 of them are born the week of her birthday and one of them's on her actual birthday. So she was like, it's legit the worst. So
She
yeah, we're
totally
gonna do.
related.
Yeah, and she also has the world's longest finger. So like I went into labor and the on-call OB at the hospital was like, "Oh, you had Dr. Graybush, didn't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Her membrane sweeps work like 98% of the time."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But she was like, she gave me a sweep at like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and Caroline was born at like 10:30.
Wow.
So I went home and started feeling contractions like by the time I got back to my house. And then they started to get regular pretty quickly. So then we hightailed it for the ER. And then we got there and they actually slowed down, and the triage was like, well, you're only 4 centimeters, so we're not really allowed like by insurance to admit you until you're 5 centimeters.
And you were like,
So
do you want to see my track record?
yeah, right. Well, they knew because one of the doctors or one of the nurses there actually remembered me from triage from when I had my
Oh
son.
my
And so
gosh.
she was like, how about you do some laps? So we literally did laps around triage and the delivery because it was like a big circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And triage is on one side and delivery is on the other. And so we just did laps. And about 20 minutes later, I was like, I need to be checked because I felt her drop. And I was like, I
Yeah.
can't, like, we got to do this. And they were like, cool, you're 7 centimeters. We're going to go.
Oh my
And
gosh. Thank gosh you didn't go home.
yes. And again, they walked me to the delivery room and I had her like it was probably about an hour after that
That's
because I
so
was able
wild.
to get an epidural, but it didn't take until I was being stitched up. It was that fast. Like because sitting up for the epidural, I guess, was just the gravity that I needed, and I laid back down and basically had her right away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The
That's so wild.
anesthesiologist was there for it.
It makes me think, I'm like, some of the listeners are probably like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I totally relate. Cause like some babies do come so
Hmm.
quickly. And I'm sure other people are listening going like, oh my gosh, I envy you. Like, you
So
know?
I know. And what I tell people a lot is like, think about like the amount of pain that you're in, right? Okay, over however long your labor is. And with all of my labors, I can say that I was probably roughly in the same amount of pain total, like overall, but like spread out with my first, which was my longest labor, 5 hours. It was so much easier. Like it was just so much easier. It felt a little more tolerable. Things were slower. When it's that quick, there's a part of your body that's just like everything is tense because it's so fast. Everything's you go from 0 to 60. So like I feel the same amount of pain, but I'm feeling it in like this time in like this tiny time frame instead of over this long time frame. And it's
Right.
just like there's and I would never want to be in labor for as long as some women are. Like my mom saying she was in labor for 36 hours. I was like, I am so sorry. Like I
Oh
don't
my
wish that on
gosh.
my worst enemy, but there is something to be said for the fact that, precipitous labors are just they're rough because there's no preparation like in your brain because you're like, 1 second you're cooking dinner and the next second like you have a baby basically.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
It's
it's like
insane.
it's a struggle. And like that's part of the problem is like everybody's so different. It's hard to even compare because
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
all of my labors were so wildly different, even though all of them were very short. They're
Right.
still so wildly different from one another.
Exactly. I mean, you're having these very short and you're having all vaginal deliveries, yet, like you said,
Hmm.
yes, everything is so different. That's why I was so excited when you said you were gonna be willing to come chat because you're right. Like everybody experiences, their own births are different, and then your birth is going to be
Absolutely.
different than the person sitting next to you. So,
Right.
which is super cool. Okay, so let's jump into birth story number 4. You can go into however much depth you want, and then we'll jump into some postpartum chatting, and after that, and kind of like what it felt different and all of that. So yeah, if you want to let's hear the story everyone came here for.
Okay, so first of all, it's important to note that my third and fourth babies are 13 and a half months apart, okay?
Right.
So my story for number 4 actually starts with the birth of number 3 because I breastfed, and she was the first one that I was able to successfully breastfeed for a year.
Yay, that's so
I
exciting.
know,
Like
I
pat
know.
yourself on the back for
I know,
me.
for real. And for me, it was a supply issue. Like, it wasn't like, there was a little bit of mentality, but it was mostly like a supply problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like the first baby that I made it to a year, and I was so proud of myself. But like, because of that, what I found out from the resident when I was literally giving birth to number 4 was that breastfeeding hides a lot, like masks a lot of pregnancy symptoms, because there's all sorts of things going on with your body and the hormones and everything. And so he said, like, the most often when women who are not pregnant with their first baby and don't know it, what's often happening is that they're really close together and you just don't realize it, because like you're already, like, your body's already changing all over the place just from having a baby and all of that stuff. And so yeah, so I breastfed her, and that summer, so the summer of 2019, my whole family got sick. We all got this stomach bug, and it was awful, and like we were all sick, and I got it like a week after everybody. So it was a little bit weird, but I was like, nah, everybody
Stomach
had the
bug.
stomach bug. Like,
Colds are always around. Right.
my body was like, oh, okay, well, everybody else is finally healthy, so you're allowed to be sick, basically.
Right.
So I didn't think much of it. And then in February of 2020, I went to Scotland with my sister for her bachelorette party. And I walked around Scotland for a week, and because they walk everywhere there. And so all of her British friends were like walking everywhere, and it was a struggle for me, like a real struggle. And I was like, I know that like I'd had a baby a year ago, and all of this stuff, but like I'm not this out of shape. Like, I swear I'm not this out of shape. Like, at one point I thought I pulled a groin muscle. I was like, I'm dying. Like, this is awful. And then March 2020 rolls around, and the world is shutting down. The world is literally like going insane because of COVID. And I wake up, and it's the morning before Pennsylvania closed everything, okay?
Okay.
So I wake up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, I really have to go to the bathroom. So I get up and I go to the bathroom, and I'm like, it like I just don't feel right. And I got back in bed, and I'm laying there, and I start getting these pains in my back. And I'm like, you know, this pain feels really familiar, but like it's super weird that I'd be having this pain because it feels like labor.
Right.
Like, it's got to be kidney stones. It's got to be kidney stones. So I lay there for a while, and for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take out my contraction timer because this is just super weird. So I started timing these pains because they were coming and going, and I was like, these feel a heck of a lot like contractions. This is just
Now
bizarre.
you were convincing yourself they were kidney stones. Had you had kidney stones before?
No, but a lot of like, so I know that back pain, it's like the same general
Yeah.
area, like in your
Right.
back. And I know that it can like wax and wane. And,
Yep. And people say it's comparable.
right. And because I just had trouble going to the bathroom, I was like, okay, well, maybe that's the problem.
Maybe it's
Okay.
something
So,
like that.
but then I'm timing them, and I'm like, I don't think these are contraction pains, or I don't think these are kidney stones. I think these are contraction pains.
Contraction.
So around like 5, my husband actually woke up because he was a bakery manager, and so he was getting up and getting ready for work, and I was like, I
Hmm.
think you need to call somebody and have them come in for you, because I think I need to go to the ER. I think I'm having a baby. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he just keeps getting ready, and I was like, no, 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 I'm not telling you I'm pregnant. I'm telling you I'm pregnant, and I think I'm in labor. And he was like, oh.
Which, like, okay, but like you wake up on a random, like, whatever day of the week, Tuesday morning, and you're like, hey, like, I think that I'm having your child. And he's probably
Yeah.
like, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
Like,
So
as
he
much as you were too, like, how the heck did you wrap your mind around that in the moment?
I don't even know. I mean, like at that point, I'd been up for almost an hour and feeling these pains, and I was like, this can't be like, we need to go to the ER because it's either kidney stones or I'm having a baby. And like either way, I need to get to the ER for it because it was really painful.
Right.
So
Were you having like all of a sudden like flashbacks to like the last 9 months of your
yes.
life and being like, oh, wait, that makes way more sense now. Like the stomach bug, the this, the that. Like, was it all just like slowly clicking or did it wait till like
No,
way later?
after it was way after. It was way
Okay.
after. But I just was like, I just had a feeling. I was like, this isn't, I don't think this is kidney stone. I think I might, and I'd been feeling phantom, quote in quotes, phantom
Right.
baby kicks for a long time, but I'd felt them in between all of my kids, so I hadn't
Yeah.
really thought much of it.
Okay.
Turns out they weren't phantom.
Ghost baby girl in there.
Yeah. But anyway, so he called and they were like, okay, well just let us know. He's like, I don't know what's wrong with my wife, but I have to take her to the ER. I'm really not sure what's going on. Like, I'll let you know.
Right,
And
because you can't call into work and be like, hi, I think my wife's having a baby. They're gonna be like, what?
exactly. So luckily my mom has a church job, and at the time she lived with me, but that was the first Sunday that they didn't have church. So she was actually free. So we were like, can you please watch the kids? Something weird's happening. We don't know.
Yeah.
I actually sat down and was like, I don't know what's happening, and this is weird to me too, but I'm going to tell you I think I might be in labor. And my mom was like, what? And I was like, I'm so sorry. I just need you to watch the kids. We'll be back. I
Oh my
Spoiler
gosh.
alert, I was not back. I was not back for a few days. But so I got to the hospital and we go in, and at that point my contractions were pretty bad, and I was like, and so they're trying to ask me questions, and the first thing that Adam's like, I think that my wife is in labor. And they're like, oh, okay, well, what's the date of your last menstrual period? And I was like, May 2018. And they were like, what? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, do you know how far along you are? I'm like, I don't know. I
Nope.
haven't had a period since before my last kid was born. She's 13 and a half months. Like, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to take you up to triage on the maternity floor immediately, because the ER was like, we aren't touching her. We are not
Right,
touching
because at
this
this point
lady.
they're all like, I have no idea like what's
Yeah, well,
happening.
and he was like, she's not sure, but like we don't know. And they were like, well, if there's a chance, we're gonna
We're
send you
sending you
upstairs.
upstairs.
And if you have to come back down, like no big deal. But you are not having a baby here. Like you are not having a
And
baby
like
on
I
this.
was gonna say, maybe this is a generalized statement, but my girlfriend's an EMT and she talks about it all the time. She's like, us and the ER nurses are always the ones that are like, we're deathly afraid of like a baby just being born on us. And like, I don't want that. And like, maybe that's me generalizing it and her fears that's being projected on everyone
No,
else.
that's like
But
a
like,
general, that is like such
yeah.
no, because there's a lot of like there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of additional training that goes into that. And so like
Right.
that is a legitimate
It's a
fear.
lot. And
It
when you go to
is.
an ER, like there's so many things they could be, evaluating that they don't have, every single tiny bit of knowledge that they would need to know
Yeah.
for this type of a situation. Okay,
Well,
so they send
and
you,
exactly because I didn't know any information, they were like,
they were like,
"Yeah,
I have no idea.
we're
Oh
sending
my
you to the
gosh.
pros. We're sending you to
So
the
you
pros
go
because we're the
upstairs
best."
and what did they do?
So I went upstairs, and thank God there was like literally nobody there. So I had like the entire freaking team. And first, a nurse and a resident came in, and they're like, "Well, the first thing we're gonna do is an ultrasound because obviously, like, if you're not pregnant, like, you're not supposed to be here." So I'm
Right.
like, "Okay." So God bless this resident. Like, I wish I could remember his name because he truly was like, I don't know if he ended up in OB or where he ended up, but he was like my savior of the morning because
Oh,
he put the wand down and he goes, "Oh, well, you definitely have a baby in there." And I was like, "Okay, cool." I start crying, and my husband just goes, "Well, I guess we got to get a minivan." And I'm like, "Really? This is the time that you're going to say
and
that?" Like, I'm
you
losing.
just find out that you're pregnant, you're having a baby, we don't know what's happening, your children are at home, and here he says we need a
He's
minivan.
cool as a cucumber, just like, well, I guess we better start looking at minivans.
Okay, but like, could you
So,
imagine if it was like someone's first, they would be like, "Oh no," freaking out. He's like, "This
God,
is the fourth. I've done
right?
it." Like,
Right.
easy
He's like,
peasy.
whatever. We got three more at home. It is what it is. Okay. Like
Oh my
we still
gosh.
got all the stuff in the garage. It'll be fine. So they go out, they're like, okay, so they checked me. I was 5 centimeters. They're like, well, and an important thing to note is that also all of my babies have been born really small. My third was like right on the cusp of IUGR. Like another part of the reason that I got the membrane sweep was because the OB was really ticked that they didn't induce me the week before, because when I'd had my last ultrasound, she was at the 11th percentile, and they don't induce until the 10th percentile. But she'd gone from like 60th percentile at the beginning of my pregnancy to 11th. And she was really ticked. And she was like,
Wow.
we got to get this baby out, because like
Right.
that can't continue. So all of my babies have been really small though. My biggest baby was 6 pounds on the dot.
Wow. So when they
Yeah.
measured baby, they were like, "Oh, this baby's small," but you were
So
like,
they
"That's my
so they
always my
measured her,
babies."
and yeah, they measured her and they were like, you're probably like between 32 and 34 weeks. And so we're gonna try to stop labor. And that was the only time while I was in labor that I laughed at them. I literally laughed at them and I was like, I'm sorry. First of all of my babies have been small. Like you can go back and check. I swear to you, she's probably like this baby. And we didn't know. She had her legs crossed. So they asked if we wanted to find out the gender, and I was like, like I guess if you can see it, you can tell me. But at this point, like I might as well be team green for the next hour. Like,
Oh my
what's
gosh,
it gonna?
you're like, I'm gonna know in 5 minutes anyway. If I'm gonna make this a day
Exactly.
of surprises, I
And they
might
were
as
like,
well make them all.
oh well, they've got their legs crossed anyway, so we can't tell. I was like, oh whatever. Like I've never been team green, so it'll be fun to not know until they're
Yeah.
born, right? So, yeah, so they were like, we're gonna like go out and talk and find the best like route to try to stop labor. And I was like, that's not gonna happen. I've got pretty fast and furious labors. Like we're in it to win it now. Like this is happening.
There's no stopping it.
Yeah, this is not something you can stop. And so so they're like, okay, well, call us if anything happens. They're like, you're about 5 centimeters. So they go out, and I immediately have the worst contraction, and I feel like I have to push. And I like grabbed my husband's hand and I said, when this contraction is done, I need you to hand me the remote so I can call the nurse. So he hands me the remote. I call the nurse. I start getting another contraction. So Adam's like, she says she feels like she needs to push. They come running in. She checks me again. I'm 7 centimeters. They're like, she's 7 centimeters. And like everybody comes running in the room. And I'm like, I can't walk. I can't walk out. I will literally have this baby in your hallway. I cannot walk. And they're like, oh no, you're not walking. Like this is progressing very, very quickly. You're not walking. So they take me into the room, like on the gurney, and they're like, okay, all you have to do is just shift your butt over. And I'm like, this baby's coming now. And they're like, no, 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 no. It's okay. Like, you just have to shift your butt over, and then we can talk about it. And I'm like, she is like, this baby is literally coming out of me right now.
I can
And
feel this.
the nurse lifts the sheet and goes, oh, there's the head.
Talk about like, hang on. So like approximately one contraction, a quick jaunt down the hallway on a gurney, and we went from 5 to here's a baby's head. And let's just mention that you just said they were trying to stop this labor. You're like, I told you so.
From the time that they gave me the ultrasound, like from the time that I got up to the triage floor to when she was delivered was 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So she was born on the gurney. Not even, they were like afterward, they were like, can you get in the bed now?
Oh my god.
They're like, it's really not safe for you to stay on this gurney. Can you please get in the bed? I'm like, yeah, I can get in the bed now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is wild.
And then we had to call everybody.
Right. Like, is she okay?
Yeah, she was fine.
She was good?
She was 30. They estimated she was about 38 weeks.
Okay.
And perfect. She was 5 pounds, 14 ounces, and just tiny and totally perfect. No problems whatsoever. She was actually the only one of my kids that stayed with me in the room the entire time.
Yeah.
Had no problems. Because my third had problems with her glucose and my second had problems with his temperature. So
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad that she's good. Now, what was it like calling everybody and telling them, hey, this just happened? Like, did people think you were pulling like an April Fool's joke? Like,
yeah.
And meanwhile, like you said, like this was like world shutting down while you're in labor, like COVID times.
Yeah. So when everything like calmed down, they told my husband like, okay, so you can stay here today because we're still allowing visitors, but like come midnight tonight, like we're shutting the doors and visitors that are not already in the building cannot come in. So like the only time he was going to be able to come back was when I was discharged. So that was like a little frustrating because he did have to go to work the next day. So he left and then I was like by myself. And because COVID was so new, they basically were just like limiting their contact as much as they could with patients. So nobody was coming into the room unless I like physically needed something or it was in between shift changes. So that was rough. But calling everybody. So my mom like kind of knew, right? Because we sort of like gave her the rundown before and we were like,
Right. And at
and
this
my
point, you're in the hospital for not just like an hour in the ER. Like it's been a couple hours. She hasn't
right,
heard from you. I'm sure she's
right.
like,
Yeah. And let's see, my sister and her husband had been, well, at the time he was still her fiance, but had been at our house until like almost midnight the night before because we were playing board games. We do like family game night. And
oh.
so my husband called them and he's like, "Hey, so how do you guys like being an aunt and uncle?" And they're like, "I mean, it's fine, I guess. Like we like it. It's pretty great." And he's like, "Okay, cuz your aunt and uncles again." And they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Oh
It
my
was just a whole
gosh.
thing. My mother-in-law didn't believe that we didn't know. She was like, "Were you guys just embarrassed and you didn't want to tell anyone?" And we were
I was
like,
gonna say, like, I would
"No."
full-heartedly believe that there are many listeners that are like, okay, come on, like you had to have known. Like,
Mm-mm.
you look back and like, is there anything that you like looked back at and you're like, wow, that makes sense now? Like you said, the stomach bug, like now it makes sense and like those quote unquote
Yeah.
phantom kicks. But like, was there anything that really kind of was like, oh my gosh, how did I not notice that?
So the walking around Scotland was the biggest one for me. Was like I was at that point, if she was born at 38 weeks, so I was probably like 32 to 34 weeks when I was in Scotland. And so just like the fat, like all like feeling like I pulled a groin muscle, like not being able to walk very well. I was like so tired. I was like, winded all the time, winded
Yeah.
all of the time. But again, like it's Scotland and it was Scotland in February, so it was like really cold. So like it also made sense that I was winded because it's
Mm-hmm.
super windy there. So like your breath catches a lot. But yeah, so like that was the other big thing that I was just like, oh, I actually texted the group that like we went to Scotland with. I actually texted them afterward and I was like, guys, good news. I'm not super out of shape. I was just pregnant. And
Oh
they had
my
made a joke
gosh.
while we were there that I was pregnant because I don't drink very much. Like I'm not a huge drinker, but we went to like a whiskey tasting and I didn't do it. I just like sort of, passively participated, but I didn't try any of the whiskeys. And they were like, "Oh, is it because you're pregnant?" And I was like, "No, I just like am not a big whiskey person. Like it's fine. It was whatever." And then they were like, "So you were pregnant."
Right. Well, so it makes me laugh. That was going to be one of my other questions. Was going to be like, obviously, like they tell you not to drink during pregnancy, but like you had no idea, and you said you were breastfeeding. So, like, I mean, were there any times when you like looked back and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that? Like, you obviously like
Yes.
flew when you were super pregnant, like, and they say probably not to do that. Like, were there things that you were like, oh my gosh, like obviously she's okay, so like we don't have to worry about
Right.
that, but like, oh my gosh.
So funnily enough, my sister's like a big traveler. So she is like super insistent that we always wear compression socks. And I swear that that saved me when we were
Wow.
flying was wearing compression
Mm-hmm.
socks. But back in October of the year before, I had a friend come into town and we had like gone out and been drinking. And I drank more than I think like I had since college. And it was just because it was a fun night. I was taking the train. So like everything was totally safe. Like I wasn't, I was being very, conscientious and stuff, but at the same time, like I look back and I'm like, if she had had fetal alcohol syndrome, it would have been because of that night.
Oh my gosh. But like you said, it's not like you're, out there getting at it every night. Like it was
Right.
a one-time thing. So like that's thank goodness it was that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's so wild. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So like you didn't get to prepare for any of that. And then it
Mm-mm.
was COVID and like did you have stuff? Were you guys planning to have another one? Did you have all of your stuff still?
So
What was it like?
we had like just started getting rid of stuff. So there was some stuff that we had to buy. And we couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
So I had friends of mine who actually started like a registry on Amazon for me while I was still in the hospital. And my Color Street team like sent me stuff. Like they just went on my registry and just bought stuff. And I had stuff showing up at my house for weeks. And people sent me Tux pads and diapers and wipes and onesies for the baby and like all of the diapers. And when I found out that she was smaller, they adjusted the diaper size, so like
Oh
I
my
had preemie
gosh.
diapers and size 1s and size 2s. Like they sent me everything. They sent me chocolate. I mean, they literally
Oh,
sent me everything. A couple girls sent me like nightgowns that were like maternity, like nursing nightgowns. Like they were just fabulous. And if I hadn't had that, it would have been a much harder thing, especially like with COVID and then not being prepared. And then like the toilet paper thing happened really soon after that. So like people were buying up baby wipes. You couldn't get baby wipes. You couldn't get diapers. Like it was really, really tough. And I was so grateful that it happened when it did, because had it happened like a week later, like I'm not sure I would have been able to get diapers.
It's so
So
wild.
it
I know,
was
and that's so
crazy.
amazing. And for those who are listening, Karin and I both did Color Street, sold Color Street together, and that's how we met. And so it was like such a good team. And I remember like joining the team because I joined during COVID. And I remember seeing people saying, "Oh my gosh, like Karin just had this baby." And I was like, "Oh, okay, like whatever." Like I didn't know, but like it truly was like there was such like a good like sisterhood kind of thing that like people were like shocked, but then also wanted to help you. And I think people were also just in a time in their lives where everything was so uncertain that like even more so people wanted to be able to help. So like yeah, it must have been like really reassuring to have that, like you said, because then everything otherwise, if you didn't have those people, like what you wouldn't have had everything you needed, right? Like
yeah, like Haley and Morgan put the whole thing together. Morgan was like, send me your sizes, like send me what you need. And I was like, I don't know, I'm a size extra large. Like other than that, like I got nothing. And she and Haley put together like this extensive list and just like posted it. And people bought stuff. Yeah. And I mean, literally there, like the first day that Amazon didn't have a package for me, they still stopped at my house because they were convinced that they were wrong. It was really funny.
Everyone, I'm sure a lot of new parents can relate to that. Amazon is like the most amazing thing, I swear.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
Oh
but
my
yeah,
gosh.
I mean, like the hardest part was just, so I had postpartum anxiety with all four of my kids. Less so with the first, really badly with the second. Um, and so like, but I sort of had prepared myself for it before. And so like going into COVID and not knowing I was pregnant, like that was just an additional hurdle. But the nice thing was that because I was aware of it, I was able to just go to my OB and say, listen, can I just get a prescription? And she was like, yeah, the world's like in absolute chaos. Absolutely. And she just like gave me a prescription and I took it and I had a lot less problems because of that, but only
That's
because
amazing.
I was aware of it. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like I feel like I was gonna jump into postpartum stuff, so you like perfectly leeway through, but like I feel like so many people hear about postpartum depression, right? And that's the only type of postpartum mood disorders they really think about. And then you're feeling the way you're feeling, and a lot of people don't share that. And then they're just like, oh, it's just what they call the baby blues. It's fine. And like baby blues should only be a week or two, and it shouldn't be affecting your ability to function. Like, so would you be willing to share like what postpartum anxiety looked like for you and like what made you realize that it was that, or like how that whole process was? Because you said, did you have it the first time as well, you said?
I had it the first time just like a little bit. It was very slight and it was more like I don't even know because I've had anxiety in the past. Like I've been diagnosed with anxiety in the past. And so like it's hard to tell how much of it was just like all of the changes in my life sort of compiling and just like adding to the stress. But with number two, I had just moved from Pennsylvania to South Carolina. And so I was really far away from family and just like there were days where so we lived in my mother-in-law's house and we had like rule of the third floor of her house. Like we had two bedrooms and like a little living room area and then a full bathroom. And there were days that I would just not even come downstairs. And it wasn't like a I can't get out of bed, I'm so depressed. It was more of like a I can control my environment in this room. And past this room, I can't control my environment. Like past this area, I can't control my environment. And like even the thought of like going and talking to somebody else, like other than my husband, I was like, I can't. Like I don't want to. We ended up putting my oldest in preschool because I was just having such a rough time. And it wasn't, yeah, like I said, it was never like I was never like sad or like, not able to get out of bed, like that kind of thing, but like or like, not doing my ADLs. Like I could still get up and I would take a shower and all this stuff, but like I would take a shower and I would put him like in a baby bouncer right outside of the shower and I would be like checking on him like every 10 seconds. Like I would be like, shampoo in my hair and then check and make sure he's okay. I'm like, he's right there. I can hear him, right? Like he's right there. And just like anytime that we wanted to go out anywhere, like anytime that my mother-in-law wanted to go anywhere or do anything, like I didn't want to take the baby. I didn't want to go anywhere. Like, because again, like I can't control the environment. And that was a big thing. And with my third, that was the biggest thing, was that like I was so anxious about being just me and having all three kids out of the house. I didn't leave my house for months, for months. And the only thing I would do was go to church because I could put the kids all in the nursery and get an hour to myself. And I wasn't even going to church like to go to church. I was going to church for that hour of time where I could sit in a pew at church and not have to worry about where they are, because I knew where they were and I knew who was taking care of them, but I could get time to myself.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it wasn't like, it's hard to explain. I realized after a while that like something wasn't right. Like this isn't normal. I should be like wanting to take my kids out to the zoo when it gets nicer. I didn't even want to leave my house. So like I wasn't even taking them out into the backyard because it wasn't fenced in. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was just really everything about any environment that I couldn't completely control 100%. I didn't want any part of, because I couldn't control it and I didn't know what would happen. And I had all of these what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if, I drop my 3-year-old's hand to put the baby in the car seat and someone takes her, like all of this stuff. And it was just like getting so in my brain. And I finally just said to my OB, like, I don't think this is normal. And she's like, well, if it's not how you normally feel. Like if it's like, if you think back to when you weren't pregnant and that wasn't how you were feeling, even with kids, then we need to do something about it. And that's
Right.
okay.
Right. And I think that it's so hard because, especially, I mean, everybody I think has a little bit of anxiety when it comes to being a parent anyway, but it's not debilitating. I feel like that's such a strong word, but it's hard to get things done.
It really is debilitating, because it would be like I would order dinner because being in the kitchen meant I couldn't watch both of my kids, or all three of my kids at the same time, or all four of my kids.
Right.
What if the 2-year-old steps on the baby? What if the 3-year-old tries to pick her up and hurts her or shakes her or whatever? So it was like not even being able to like leave the room you're in, or leave the kids for even a second to go to the bathroom, anything, because I had 2 Bobby loungers so that I could keep the baby with me, so that I would like take one into the kitchen and put them in the Bobby lounger and just like drag it around with me, so that they were always like right there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and my husband was like, when was the last time you left the house? And I'm like, oh, it's Tuesday, last Sunday, and I wouldn't have left the house. And it is what it is. But at the same time, when you think about it, and it's like, okay, well, it's June. You didn't even want to like take them out to the sprinkler or, anything like that. And it was like, well, if I use the sprinkler, what if they fall, or what if they trip? And I'm here by myself with the kids. And yeah, it was just like, it was that like
you spiral
of,
yeah.
You just you go down
hard.
this long hole
and
you
I
can't
feel
take
like
yourself out.
Right. And I feel like I hear a lot of this from parents in general, but a lot from first-time parents that they don't know that that's what they're experiencing, and they don't know that that's not normal. And so I feel like a lot of people listening are probably going to be able to be like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that's me. And like those of you who are pregnant, think about it and like recognize these things in yourself and know that like it's not just you, and then it's okay to ask your OB. And I find that like postpartum 6-week checkup is always not the way that it should be. I'm gonna put it lightly. We're gonna do a whole other episode on that.
It's still so chaotic at 6 weeks that you're like, I don't even know up from down. Like, I don't know what time it is. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what I'm wearing. Like, you can't even remember how to spell your name at 6 weeks. It's like, it's so hard.
And it's also so hard because I think that so many people, when it comes to postpartum anxiety, are comparing themselves to either thinking they're horrible and that everything is like horrible because they're comparing themselves to like social media and what everyone says that they feel, or they feel the total opposite and they're like, well, I must be totally fine because this person has it horrible. And the biggest thing that I think about when I think of postpartum mood disorders is like, you really need to just compare yourself to you, like see how you feel day to day, and like you should be seeing progress. If you're seeing like nothing better, or you're seeing things are getting worse, like that should be a sign that you should talk to somebody. And so it's definitely hard to recognize, I think, for sure.
My therapist said, like, there's going to be what ifs. Every parent has what ifs. You're always everything, like throughout your entire parenting journey. Like it never stops until you die, literally, because there's always what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if, like when they're a baby, what if, somebody takes them? What if I get in a car accident? What if this? What if that? And then even when they're older, what if they get in a car accident? What if they die in childbirth? What if, like, there's so many what ifs surrounding your children. But what she said is like, you're always going to have those what ifs. But if those what ifs give you any more than just a hesitation about doing something that you were going to do, like if it actually stops you from doing a plan, going somewhere, and there's not a legitimate reason, there's not like a concrete actual reason why you have stopped and not done those things. If you were planning on taking your baby to a baby music class and, the what ifs, the what ifs, the what ifs, oh, you know what? I'm too tired. I'm just going to stay home. If you're doing that kind of stuff, you need to talk to somebody, because everybody has the what ifs. But if they're going to stop you from doing the things that you were going to do or the things that you would like to do, even if you're like, oh, that would be nice, and then you just don't do them because you get in your head about it, like then you just need to talk to somebody. And it's okay. There are so many people, like I really do think that postpartum mood disorders are so much more common than we have any idea that they are, because nobody talks
100%.
about them. And that's part of the problem. Like, this is why this podcast is so important, is because nobody talks about postpartum. Everybody talks about pregnancy. Here's all the things that could possibly happen to you. Here's all the things that happen to like 3%, 2%, 1%,
Right.
0.6% of the population that's pregnant. And then you have this baby and you are given, 24, 48 hours, and they're like, okay, bye, have a good life. And you go home and you've no idea. You
Right.
have no idea what you're doing. You've no idea what's normal. And you reach out to your friends. But again, just like in a birth story and anybody's deliveries, your experience is not going to be the same as anybody else's. You can be given all of the exact same things, all of the exact same situations, and they're still going to be completely different from one another. So it's hard even to like talk to other people about it unless they're going to be real with you and say like, yeah, it sucked. Or yeah, I had postpartum depression and anxiety, and I was on Lexapro for 2 years. Like, it is what it is. But like, unless you're getting that kind of realness, which a lot of people don't, because there's also a stigma about like, you're supposed to like it all the time. You have to like it. You did this to yourself. You have to like being a parent, and you don't have to like being a parent all the time.
Nope.
It's not easy. And especially at the beginning, when this is like, okay, well, here's this tiny stranger that's completely dependent on you. You guys have never met, but they're completely and totally dependent on you. Oh, by the way, your body is also completely changing and you're recovering from a major um event in
Right.
your body. Like, your body is in recovery and you have to completely take care of this
Right.
complete and total stranger.
And I find that like that's one of the things I always mention to people. I mean, with like birthing people, obviously you're physically recovering, right? Like you just
Mhm.
said, and now this child's fully dependent on you and if you have a partner there. And especially if you're breastfeeding or things like that, like the maternal instincts kick in, but like only to an extent, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this child's fully dependent on you and you're not getting anything back in it. And every
Mm-mm.
relationship in your entire life, there's a give and take. But in this chunk of time, there's nothing. And like,
Right.
you're not going to get a true smile out of this kid. You're not going to get their eyes open for a little while. Like, you're
Right.
literally just having this thing relying on you. And then
And
I always
physically
mention it.
attached to you in many
Right.
situations for like
Right.
the majority of the day.
Right. And I also mentioned that like a lot of that happens for partners as well. Like we
Hmm.
talk about mood disorders for birthing people, but like there's postpartum depression and anxiety for partners. And like
Hmm.
the rates are like still ridiculously high. I mean,
Yeah.
the statistics that there are right now, there aren't as many statistics out there post COVID, and I can only imagine that they're higher. But it's wild. And so for sure, I mean, eventually I find a lot of parents birthing people connect with the baby early on because they've been able to
Hmm.
grow this child. They're able to connect, especially if they're breastfeeding. But partners, it takes them a lot longer until
Yeah.
this child can truly play. A lot of partners feel really, really like removed from the situation.
Hmm.
And that should also be so normalized as well. And like, obviously I'm getting on tangents now, and these are topics that I'm super hyped to talk about like on other episodes. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of touch upon some of them and willing to share all of the stories that you have.
Absolutely.
I wanted to wrap us up with one question for you that I'm hoping
Sure.
I'll ask like all of my people when they come and do these types of little mini series with me. But if you had one piece of advice that you could give people and one product recommendation, what would be your piece of advice and what would be your product recommendation to all of the listeners?
Okay, so my piece of advice would be throw your expectations out the window for the whole thing, for pregnancy, for the birth, for everything after. Just throw them out the window. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean like look at it as a completely negative thing. All I mean is just you can think about the possibilities. Yeah, there's all these possibilities, but think about all of the possibilities. Don't just think about the ones that you want. Because it does set you up for disappointment. And like, yes, obviously, like we all want the best for our kids, and we all want our kids to be this, that, or the other thing. You know, we all have things that we didn't get to do that we want our kids to do, and all that stuff. But like, you just have to throw those expectations straight out. And if they happen, and that's great. But you have to just let it happen. Just let it happen. And that is so hard for so many of us.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard.
And literally it took me until number 4 to figure that out, when I literally couldn't have expectations because the world was changing on a literal hourly basis.
Correct.
So yeah, I mean, just throw those expectations out the window. And then my product is not really so much of a product, but baby wearing. And the reason it's not really a product is because you have to find what works best for you. I had a Tula and a ring sling and a baby wrap, and I loved all of them, but I ended up using the ring sling the best. I loved my ring sling. I loved it so much, and I couldn't recommend it more to anybody if I tried. But other people hate the ring sling. Other people like don't like that there's a learning curve to it, and they prefer like the, throw and go with the Tula, just throw it on and throw the baby in there
more
and you're good to
structured
go.
and buckled.
But baby wearing saved me so many times when it was like the baby wouldn't stop crying, but I really needed to eat something, or I really needed to go to the bathroom, or whatever it was. And you can just throw the baby in there and they're controlled, they're with you, which makes them happier. And you can do the things that you have to do, which for the first one is not as important because you can sort of be like more on their schedule. But when you have more than one kid, like, and you have to still be on a schedule,
Right.
baby wearing literally saved my life. Like,
baby wearing is so amazing.
So
I love that you brought that one up. I will be having an episode with the amazing Ren at some point, who is a baby wearing expert, and she'll be coming on and we're going to talk all things baby wearing. So if anyone has questions on baby wearing, head over to my Instagram and let me know. But yes, I love all of that. Thank you so much. It has been amazing and a blast. And I hope that people feel like related to and connected with and got all the things from this episode.
Absolutely. I mean, even if I can help one person, I will have felt like this was totally worth it. Because, it's always nice, like as a mom, to just feel like, your advice or whatever your experience can help somebody else. Because like, obviously it didn't help you. You experienced it in the moment.
Right.
But like my experiences can hopefully even just tell somebody like, you're not alone. It's okay. It's okay.
That's all
whatever
it needs
happens
to be.
is cool.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have you back sometime.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.